I'm not gonna do anything with it. Maybe I'll bomb. It'll be.
I didn't think you were gonna talk.
I'm not.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
You want to handle introductions and everything?
No, you can't.
If I turn it off, I can go back.
Hey, Billy, excuse me. Back again.
I'll go there. Go ahead.
But this is a bigger group.
Go ahead. You go on.
Welcome you all to the Mindfield, and I know you saw it on your agenda. How many of you have not been here before? Well, I'm real excited. We've got Billy Tripp, who's an artist and sculptor, here with us today. I've got Beth Tripp, and without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them to let you know the inspiration and story behind this incredible piece. So, guys, thank you.
Okay, well, y'all have already met me at the museum, so this is my husband, Billy.
Okay.
And I'm just going to give you a little introduction. Can you hear me back there, Tony?
Yeah, we can just a little louder, be nice.
I feel like I'm yelling. Okay. I'm just going to give you a little introduction, a little general overview about Billy and the Mindfield, and then if you have questions, you can ask him questions. He's willing to answer, I hope. So, here we go. All right, so Billy was actually born in Jackson, and he has two brothers, one older and one younger. His father was a Methodist minister. His mother graduated from UT Knoxville in home economics, and she taught some and did some work before she got married. And she decided after she married the traveling preacher that she didn't like traveling very much. So she induced him to come back here and settle down in the family house, which you can't see because food giant's in the way, but it's just on the other side of this building, the big white columned antebellum home. It didn't look like that back in the day when Billy moved back in there with his grandmother. So the parents were there, and the three little boys came back to Brownsville, and the grandmother was living there, and of course Mama, all together. And Tony has a lot of memories of Billy growing up, so she could probably share some of those with you.
I'm saving for tonight, Billy.
They're probably all true too.
So he went to school here, graduated from Haywood High School, all three boys did, and Charlie runs Tripp Country Ham, which some of you may know, and Bob became a minister, and he's now a teacher, and he's living in Knoxville. He retired from the ministry. Billy started the Mindfield in 1989, and he experimented with painting and some other forms of artwork, but settled on metalwork eventually. And he started making small to medium sized pieces in metal, and really didn't have anywhere to put them. Now, at this time, Food Giant wasn't here. There was another antebellum house there, and this was all a field. His father built all these buildings eventually, but he started putting his metalwork out in the field, and so that's where the name Mindfield came from. Just an interesting historical note, this was the old hitching lot for Brownsville. So when people would come to town on Saturday afternoon to do their business and shop, this is where they would hitch their wagons, out here in this field. So he started putting his metal work out here, and just to kind of get it up off the ground, he put some concrete under it, and it just started growing up from there. So over the years, it's grown to be the tallest and biggest sculpture in Tennessee. And the tallest piece is what he calls his father's grave marker, that has the handprints of his dad and his brothers and his handprints and a heart for his mother. She had died when Billy was about 21 before he finished all this. The water tower came from a factory in Kentucky, and he dismantled the water tower by himself, cut it all apart, brought it all back to Brownsville a piece at a time in the middle of the night to avoid the troopers.
That's true.
And welded it all back together on site. There are lots of different messages in the Mindfield, messages about birth and life and death and important events in Billy's life. He's still working on it. He was just telling me this spring he's thinking about putting up a chip burner that he got from Selmer. So that's a teepee-like building that'll go back here somewhere. So that'll be the next edition. Billy has 7 books on Amazon. So if you're interested in that, they are his notes. He kept a journal, or he still keeps a journal. Kept it for years, 20, 30 years. The notes about what he was doing when he was building the Mindfield. But his first novel is a fictionalized account of growing up in Brownsville. And honestly, it's my favorite. It's got a lot of poetry in it, but it's not easy to read. And he's divided it into 2 volumes. This is volume 1. And I'm just going to share with you, if you've got time, a little bit of it. This is a story about Billy when he decided to quit school, and he was 16 years old. Now, Billy struggled in school. He had a paper route, and he would get up at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, about that time.
3 o'clock in the morning on school night and deliver newspapers and then go to school. And I tease him all the time when he asks me questions about geography and stuff like that. And I say, you must have slept through that, because I think his teachers just let him sleep most of the time, since he'd been up since 3 o'clock. So Billy and his father were in what they call the evening study room at the house, and Billy's father is sitting at his desk, and this is a big secretary desk with books, and Billy comes in and he's decided he's going to tell him he wants to quit school. So, okay, once and almost quitting, Ned had asked his father, he calls himself Ned, who said he thought it best to be patient, that everything will work out, when it usually didn't, at least to Ned's way of thinking. Mr. James would be over by the big desk in the evening study room, when through the window double doors would come Ned, real quiet, with his hands in his pockets, with his head tilted forward, and seemingly looking at the rug. He would walk around the room once or twice, stiff-kneed, swinging his legs around slowly, thinking over what to say. He would come up to Mr. James saying, "Daddy," and pause and have to think over again some of what to say. He then would have to finish saying again, "Daddy, this school is about to keep me down." Mr. James would keep his position at the desk, not moving and waiting as if to give his son time to explain, before he himself would ask. As many times throughout life he would have to ask, "Well, what do you mean, Ned?" in order to know. Then, said Clarence, Mr. James heard what he had heard how many times before from the other 2 sons, in other words, and from Ned too, in these words. "What do you think we do there, Daddy? We don't do anything. We sit for a while, and it's just not worth it to square root or to multi something never heard of, and which I'll never use. I'm not going to be a mathematician or whatever, and neither does he want to go to college," Ned said Mr. Clarence on the porch. "He could get a job. Ned could be a garbage man. I can do that," Ned said. "But Ned, you're not old enough," Mr. James would say, his eyes open. But Ned didn't understand, said Mr. Clarence, feeling the moment behind the last spoken word bind up, then ease off, and float free with enough to let go, and then to have to let go, and would have to ask, he said to Blevins, "Well, what do you mean, Daddy? I'm 16, you know, or don't you?" "But you don't, do you, Ned? Have to be 18 to work for the city." And then said all, as if he were Ned saying all to Mr. James, "Oh, Daddy, I didn't mean that. I was saying how I could get a job. I could make money. I don't spend much, you know. And anyway, what I learned in that school, you know, I could learn it somewhere else, and it would be easier too. I can't see to be there and do nothing, and then after an hour to class and do it again, learn when someone did something they say. Who is John? Have they asked you? I bet they never have. I don't need to know. I'm wasting my time doing that." Mr. Clarence bit his lip, saw Mr. Blevins drip dry, and said Ned went down to a chair. The evening study room was too well lit, and how everything showed. Mr. James looked sort of thankingly and said, "Well, Ned, there will always be things you have to do, even with a job, things you have to do." "Well, why does he have to say that?" thought Ned, before saying, "But don't I have to go to school, Daddy? Nobody's coming around and making me go after I'm 16. I don't see why there's a school. I could be out working and traveling around." "Ned, is that what you want to do, travel around?" Mr. James asked. "Yeah, maybe for a while," Ned answered. "Well, how do you plan to pay for it? And how do you plan to eat? You have to have a place to stay. You can't just up and move and not know where and how and what you're going to do." But again, Ned didn't understand that what I saved up working for you, I could use that for a little while until I might get a job and I could rent a place, and I wouldn't need a big place, just something I could use. Not like paying for a family in a big old house like this, you know, Daddy. "Well, if James did," said Clarence, "then Daddy didn't show it much. How he kept his position with the swivel chair, moved his elbow up to the desktop, tilted his head forward, and stiff wristly, with a slow, methodical rhythm, a thumb and two fingers oscillated between the extremes of contact with each other on that light, soft, sensitive patch of skin just above the eyeglasses. And you just see him rubbing his head." And something, said Clarence, in the back of Ned's mind, even then quietly took note of what transpired. With his eyes shut, or close to being shut, Mr. James said, "Now, Ned, if you've thought it through and decided it's what you want to do, then I won't stop you. And if what you say about traveling around the country and living like you say you want to do, if that's what you really would like to do, then you can quit school, and I won't say anything about you going. But, oh Lord, here it comes," Ned thought. "Personally," said Mr. James, "I think that kind of living is a foolish life. It has no meaning to me whatsoever. But, maybe not," Ned thought. "But you have to decide, Ned. It's not up to me," said Mr. James. "Please at least think it through, though. There's no need to go and leave tomorrow. Just stay and think it over and decide." Mr. James' elbow moved from the desktop, his eyes opened, blinking 3 times. "Ned was silent," said Mr. Clarence. "But I can tell you," he said to Blevins, who did not move, "that further, for fact, that Ned checked out the moorings, and then said at last, finally continuing, and found some sort of coordinates that night in the evening study room, even while feeling himself to drift at sea in all the talk of whether or not to quit school and travel around. Coordinates of drowning, latitudes, of this, apparently an end, of swimming a way out through reasoning. And Ned watched, floating by beyond reach, the driftwood thoughts of how he left the chair. He said to Blevins, before the flotsam of how he left the room, "Real quiet," said Mr. Clarence, as if he had come in through the windowed double doors. Okay, I'm going to leave it up to Billy here.
Yeah, first time I was asked to talk to a group of people like yourselves who were interested in improving the quality of life of their community, whether through the citizens already there or through the business, trying to attract businesses to their area. I really didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what my work, which is kind of an outdoor type of decoration, why it would be of interest to them. And I thought about that, and I finally came up with one story. And over the years, it's the only story I've come up with as to why y'all or anybody like you who's trying to improve their community would be interested in it. But I've told it so many times that I am kind of tired of it. And I really don't, I can't think of anything else why it would be, so I'd have to apologize to you first if I tell it again. Because without some sort of little change in it, it's hard to keep it fresh. But I told my wife this before she told me y'all wanted me to talk to you again. And I just said, I just can't do it again. I've done this so much. I just can't stand up and tell the same old story without a little change. And she said, well, what if I stand up and talk to them about the Mindfield, and then you just answer questions? And I thought, well, that's a change. That'll be different. So she did that, and so I'll tell you the story. I can imagine a person, let's say an industry wanting to move to Brownsville and or to the Mid-South area. And so they do their homework and they go to the surrounding counties and meet with the people or the mayors to see what they have to offer. And so they come to Brownsville and meet with the mayor, and the mayor tells them, we're this and we're that, and we have this and we have that. And after a while, I'm sure it can come across as being very generic. Is that what we have here is very similar to what you would have in your communities around here. And I can see the mayor, he or she, sensing this, and that this industrial prospect is not quite convinced about why they should locate maybe here instead of someplace else. So I can see the mayor saying, well, come with me. And so they come down here in front of my work, and I can see the mayor saying, now look at this. If we can work with this oddity, then rest assured we will likewise extend to you every possible consideration we can. And I think that way of custom dealing with the challenges of the community is very, very valuable. And you're not just dealing with generic people or generic industries, but specific people in specific industries. And it's hard for me to get my head around the changes that I am told are in store for West Tennessee because of Blue Oval City coming. But it's easy for me to feel that changes are coming. And I think you, out of coincidence or whatever brought you here to this time of being in this group, for the first group to go through this with Ford announcing they're going to locate in West Tennessee, you really have an opportunity. And I don't know how I can help you without a little change. And change is coming, and I feel like if I were to speak from the context of my own little world, I've done all I can do. I've just got a one story thing. My work's very like a conversation with myself. But I wish y'all best of luck, and you have really quite an opportunity to leave your thumbprint on the future. And I'm anxious to see of what will come about because of your participation in this group and in your communities. And I'm here only because of change, and that was because my wife Beth is here. I'm kind of tired of talking. But anyway, do y'all want any questions, Beth or I?
I just wondered, do you have a favorite piece?
I do. It's the tallest thing down there, and that was my dad's grave marker. It's just a tall beam, and I was working on it before he died, and I took a drawing of his hands, prints, and cut them out. They're about eye level down there, and so I put my brother's hands and some words. And at the bottom, I have some words. This is kind of like a test I tell some people. At the bottom of it, it says, and so now, Billy, begin your life without him. My dad, 2002. Now, why did I put two ands at the first? I said, and so now, Billy, begin your life without him. Because I was stuttering. I was having a hard time, which is very typical, I guess, when you lose a loved one. But I just didn't know how to go forward, But I got there. So.
Andy graduated from high school.
I did. I did. A C student. A C student. What?
The two neon people up there.
My niece, I was visiting my younger brother and his daughter, and they were having a yard sale, and those were her 3-foot Barbie dolls. And I just put them up there. They're not really made to last, but I was trying to.
I was going to say, what did you cover them in? Yeah.
I painted them to keep the sun from rotting them,
And it worked.
and I was trying to celebrate maybe human beauty. But I apologize that, Barbie dolls are so unattainable anyway. I mean, those were the only ones available to me. Nobody's a Ken or a Barbie, but that was just kind of something to play around with.
It's absolutely beautiful.
And I started in '89, and had to do some other stuff along that time, but I'm trying to work on it pretty full time now. But it seems like it should be more for that amount of time, but that's all I could do, And so I'm going to be cremated and buried here. So my dad although he's buried in the city cemetery over here, so kind of like my dad's grave marker here is kind of goes along with that theme. And the two silhouettes, y'all tell me when to stop. All right, that somebody like this up there, one's right side up and the other side. Those are mine, but there's some words underneath both of them, and together they make up my epitaph. That would go on a grave, and it's here I labor to live, acceptingly trading my life for it lived, knowingly for death. So that's it starts on the, am I done?
You're done.
Okay.
One more thing. What's in the center of those? It says BEG. I may be missing part of it.
Where?
Between the two.
Above the canoe.
Yeah, above the canoe. Thank
Oh, well, above the canoe are those circles. And that's kind of like a sunset or a sunrise. And above that, we're reading it backwards, but it's begin. And that's the first and last word of the book that she just read from. And if you think of it as a ship, it has a ship theme in the canoe and being a grave marker. And, you know, so the ship could be beginning to go to the next life, you know. And so that's the begin into the sunset, maybe. Or in the canoe, you could use it for the last few leagues where it's too shallow for a big ship. You know, I like to build in little stories. And why not? You know, I don't have children, so.
I'm going to read you the epitaph. The introduction to the book is really
Dedication.
short. Dedication. But before I do, if you get a chance, get on YouTube and look up Ken Heron's videos of the Mindfield at night. He does drone videos, and they are really, really good. Okay, so it says, for my father, for the sweet memory of my mother, and for the union he says they successfully had, which a part of created and nurtured me in the daily acts of simply being themselves.
And that's how they were. I mean,
Billy, we want on behalf of the WESTSTAR class of 2022, we want to present you with a little token of our
Well.
appreciation for you speaking to us today, and you definitely left a thumbprint on this community, for sure.
well,
For sure.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good, baby.
You want to say that again into the microphone?
You did good.
Y'all hear that? That's